This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.
What's up, everybody? Happy Wednesday. As the Miami Heat have, it's a little bit different show this Wednesday as opposed to last Wednesday. Clay Ferraro here, Ira Winderman there, and we're going to get into, I think, the potential playoff matchups now that we're getting down to it. And Heat have to win one of their last two games or get a little bit of help from teams playing Milwaukee and Boston in order to get that one seed. But it looks more likely than not. I think it's safe to say that they're going to get that one seed. But Ira, I want to start here. As we look back to where we were a week ago today versus where we are now. And we can go through all the reasons for it, but what changed? What is different with this team now compared to a week ago? Whether it's the lineup changed, I want to go through, in your opinion, what you think are the top 2 or 3 reasons why this team looks so much different now than they did a week ago.
Well, first of all, when you had the 4-game losing streak, the Heat just weren't that bad. So you're going to have a rough spot along the way. But at no point during the depth of those losses, even the Brooklyn loss, the loss to shorthanded teams, that was the late season malaise, the lack of motivation. Because you know what? Through it all, they were still near or at the top of the standings. And I just think the Heat lost their motivation to a degree because they were in the mid-70s in games and they were approaching game 80. And I think that's the typical human condition that it happens when you're cruising along there. The difference is, and we spoke about this in the crosstalk with Big O, the Panthers have never been here. So for them, everything is still fresh, exciting, and new. The Heat were in the NBA Finals in 2020, just 2 seasons ago. So for them, they've had their success. They know this can work. And I think it was just the malaise. And what they needed was a kick in the pants, a kick in the ass. And that's what they got. And that's what, if they didn't get, they got it when Eric Spoelstra and Udonis Haslem and Jimmy Butler mixed it up on the bench. And so that just motivated them a little more and pushed them a little more to be truer to who they are themselves. Clay, I just think that this sounds weird. I think they needed that 4-game losing streak. And I think they needed the jolt of a couple of those games. And I think they needed a little bit more of sort of get back to who you are. So what did they do? The players took it to heart. Eric Spoelstra shook things up from the rotation standpoint to get the players to take it to heart. And then we've seen the 5-game winning streak, which for all they've been through, this ties their longest winning streak of the season.
All right, Ira. So I'm getting some audio issues here. I'm going to pop out real quick and pop back in. So yeah, let me jump out and jump back in on this thing.
All right. Well, I will keep the folks up to date. Clay, while you're gone, I'll set up the play-in and how that's going to work out. So right now, it looks like the Heat are going to finish at least in the top 2 in the Eastern Conference. When you finish in the top 2 in the Eastern Conference, it means you play the teams in the play-in games. So
yes, sir.
You pretty much can eliminate Toronto and Chicago from Heat playoff possibilities. The Heat will open the first round against one of 4 teams. Against the Charlotte Hornets, that would be fun. Against the Atlanta Hawks, against the Brooklyn Nets, or against the Cleveland Cavaliers, who really have fallen off the face of the earth, or who basically have returned to who they are. They were a nice little fun story. Oh boy, we're at the top of the standings, and now they're, oh boy.
You know what? They should not be disappointed. They've had a good year.
Yes,
they were better. In the end, they were better than any of us expected the Cavs would be. Okay, let's be honest.
I've always said this. You want to play a team in the first round of the playoffs who's just happy to be there. If you play the Cavaliers in the first round, it's like, we're in the playoffs. Kevin Love's career is resurrected. They're fine. If you play Charlotte, who fell in the play-in round last season, they'll just be glad to be there. We're a playoff team. Michael Jordan's team didn't fall apart like the Lakers. They'll be happy to be there. If you play the Hawks, a little bit different. They went to the Eastern Conference Finals last season. They, even with their uneven season, have a feeling if we get in, we can do some damage. They did last year. Beat the Knicks in the first round, beat 76ers. All of a sudden, we're there in the conference finals. And then what the Heat were called in one season forecast, now the dangerous loomers are the Brooklyn Nets. And I know you two guys have been poo-pooing it for weeks now. They don't play defense. They have 2 players. Their bench is soft. They're not going anywhere. Yeah, that's something I still want to avoid. I will say this. The most compelling basketball in South Florida in the next 2 weeks will not be Heat versus Hawks on Friday, will not be Heat versus Magic on Sunday. It'll be the play-in round. Because the play-in round is going to tell the Heat how tough their opening round is. To reset for people, teams number 9 and 10, which right now would be, it looks like it'll be Atlanta and Brooklyn as of now, but that'll change, will play each other in a game. Loser is out. The winner of that game plays the winner of 7 and 8, which is Cleveland and Atlanta right now. So right now, Brooklyn can only finish 8th, can only play the number 1 seed. But if Brooklyn finishes 9 or 10, they have to win 2 games. Nothing is automatic for the Nets this year anyway. Here's what can happen, though, guys.
Nothing's automatic, but he gets nervous about them against the Heat. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm very nervous. I'm shaking here. That's why I'm keeping my hands out of the shot most of the time. But
so let me ask you this, Ira, not to cut you off, but so right now Brooklyn is in the 8th spot in as ESPN has the standings listed. Is there something with the tiebreaker there?
Yeah, because of tiebreaker, they moved up. That's what I was going to follow up with. And the Heat have helped that situation by beating Charlotte and potentially beating Atlanta on Friday. The Heat can push the Nets into the 7-8. Only if you're in the 7-8 can you finish with the number 7 seed. So the Heat, in many ways, can really help themselves on Friday by beating the Hawks. Because if they do that and they beat the Hawks on Friday, there's a better chance of the Nets playing in the 7-8. And the Nets could even be home against Cleveland because the Nets play Cleveland on Saturday. So you could say, oh, don't worry about the Hawks game on Friday. Number 1, it might be meaningless for the Heat. Number 2, you always have Orlando to fall back on as your season finale on Sunday. But I think the Heat very much would like to see the Nets in the 7-8 and very much will be sitting there with their popcorn hoping that the Nets wind up at number 7. Because 2 things happen then. The Heat as a number 1 seed wouldn't have to play the number 7 Nets, and the number 7 Nets could take out Milwaukee or Boston in the first round. So the play-in's going to be fascinating. The games are scheduled next Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. One conference will take Tuesday, Thursday. One conference will take Wednesday, Friday. And the Heat will be in the edge of their seats, except for Eric Spoelstra, who I'm sure, because of his crazy maniacal former video room guy, won't know his playoff opponent until about 48 hours before his playoff opener. And you know, Clay, Spo wants to build a whole game plan. Wants to build a wall against a certain team. Certain teams, if you're number 3, 4, 5, or 6, you will know your opponent when the season ends on Sunday. The Heat, they're going to have to wait. Their video guys are going to be really busy.
Yeah, and so if you're looking at how this is going to play out, let me add one more thing that happens, especially if you're able to win on Friday. You get to rest all your guys on Saturday. I mean, there are a number of reasons why it almost makes sense, Ira, when you look back at this last week and we talk about what changed. We could talk about the lineup shuffle, and we're going to. Right. With Max Strus going to the starting line. We could talk about the difference in Kyle Lowry's game. I think that his game scoring-wise, taking another jump up, has made an enormous difference for this team. But I think the biggest thing with this team, Ira, and I think you would agree, that switch that they've talked about all year that they can flip when the games really matter, they look like a completely different team when they're playing against potential playoff teams, potentially really good teams. And the Brooklyn game in the rearview mirror, it almost looks like kind of a one-off for both teams a little bit because Heat were playing poorly at that point. Brooklyn followed that up with a couple of poor performances as well. So
they did uneven, yes.
So when you look back at the last week, the Heat have started treating every one of these games almost like a playoff game. I have a feeling, Ira, they're going to come out on Friday night. They're going to treat that game like it's a playoff game, much like they have these last few games because of all the things that you mentioned, the fact that you can kind of knock Atlanta back a little bit. And yes. I don't think they're consciously thinking, oh, we want to beat Atlanta because we don't want to play Brooklyn in the first round. But I do think it just adds to, hey, let's get this thing over with. There's so much that we can control by winning this game on Friday night, everything about our own destiny, getting to take off Saturday night with the starters. There's just a lot going into that game on Friday night. But I'm with you. I think the play-in games are going to mean a lot. But the Heat are in the fortunate position where they can control so much of this just by going out there and winning on Friday.
Yeah, and again, position Brooklyn. Hopefully Brooklyn finally takes care of its own business, and it has been uneven. And I know where you and Big O are coming from. The more you look at Brooklyn, the more you see the cracks in the armor. The more you see a shaky team. The more you see a team closer to the Lakers who got eliminated last night from the playoffs than a team with true championship visions. But I have just seen too much Kevin Durant with the Nets in the last couple of weeks, with the Warriors during those championship runs, even with the Oklahoma City Thunder before that. I know he will be the best player on the floor no matter who his team plays. And that's still concerning to me. There still is an easier path. But Clay, you're 1,000% right. There is no way that Eric Spoelstra is going to go, man, I'm so glad we got the Hawks instead. Or I'm so glad we got the Hornets instead. Or I can't wait to go to Cleveland, which will be one of the first people to say that. But, and saying that instead. So, of course, he's going to go, we have a tough matchup. The Cavaliers are long and Jared Allen is back. Charlotte can score on anyone once they get going. With Trae Young, he can put 50 on you. We have to guard him to the logo. There's nothing easy. And that's the point I was making through the first 3 quarters of last night's game against Charlotte, and I tweeted this out when it was a really competitive game still. Nothing's going to be easy in these Eastern Conference playoffs. There are going to be difficult matchups throughout. The only matchup, based on how they're trending right now, is it looks like the Bulls are absolutely falling apart.
Yeah.
I mean, they are absolutely teetering. They're not even competitive right now. They said that Lonzo Ball probably will remain out through the playoffs. Zach LaVine now has some injury issues. So I'd say the team that gets Chicago might get a little bit of a respite. I think the other teams are going to have hungry competition, and the Eastern Conference playoffs are going to be really good.
And you look at where Chicago is right now. I mean, they're locked in to the 6th spot. I mean, they're not going to fall out of that, if I'm doing the math correctly. I guess there's a way that if they lose their last 3 games, I'd have to look at the tiebreakers between them and Cleveland.
That's not officially clinched. You're correct. That Chicago is not clinched. A quote-unquote playoff spot is in the top 6. Their magic number is 1 against Cleveland.
So whoever ends up in the 3 is going to get a good matchup with Chicago. However, then you're looking at the unenviable task of then going on to the road, and either if it's Boston that gets it, then you have to go to Milwaukee, vice versa, whatever. But I think from a Heat perspective with all this stuff, and I want to bring it back to kind of what's changed for this team, Max Strus going out there and doing what he's doing, and give Big O credit because he's been talking about this for a long time, more so getting Duncan out of the starting lineup and putting Max Strus out there. But I think the thing that I noticed with Max Strus, Ira, was, look, we know what he can do offensively. Nobody's going to vote him NBA All-Defensive Team anytime soon, but he does enough. And he's stronger than Duncan Robinson is. He's a little bit better at getting to spots defensively. Mm-hmm. And there were a few moments in the game where I really noticed it was the game in Boston against the Celtics, where you had Boston players, in particular Jason Tatum, guys kind of hunting Max Strus at the end of that game, trying to hunt Max, and it didn't work. Right. And look, it wasn't that Max Strus is now the Tatum stopper. But when you get to these late game situations, especially if you're going to try to find a way to play Tyler Hero late in games, you don't want to have multiple players on the floor that other teams can hunt matchup wise. And we saw that against Indiana in the playoffs a couple of seasons ago, where Pacers were able to hunt the Heat, and Malcolm Brogdon in particular would go after either Tyler Hero or Duncan Robinson. You don't want to have 2 guys like that. So having Max Strus out there, for all that he does offensively, it's the step up defensively. And I think kind of the mindset, he's got more of this alpha personality. I just think he seems to fit better, in particular with this starting lineup. And credit to Big O for kind of calling for this for a long time. But now seeing it play out, you're kind of like, oh, okay, that's the reason why he's out there and it's working.
And I want to get to something, and I think we'll talk about this later in the show also, because it is elephant in the room from last night, and certainly was until we talked to Chris Quinn post-game, and that was Victor Oladipo. And Victor Oladipo goes for 21 points on Sunday in Toronto, and he's back. It's Victor Oladipo's back, and he's going to give you 30 a game, and he's probably going to wind up starting, and he's the man, and then he doesn't play last night. Yeah. But who does play? Because I want to segue. We'll talk about Vic later. Caleb Martin comes back in. Caleb Martin is that X factor because of what you just mentioned. I'm trying to tie this together to Max Strus.
Yeah.
And even Duncan Robinson. Both of them can score and make threes. Both of them can give you 3, even if they give up 2 on the other end, put you in net positive, let you do the simple math there. The Heat are going to outscore you by 1 on those trips back and forth. Caleb Martin can give you the threes and did last night and stifle you defensively. And I think he's sort of the X factor we've been waiting on. I wrote a story at the Sun Sentinel about that. He had the Achilles. He had the hyperextended knee. He had the calf strain. You didn't know if he was going to be there. He was available for the Heat in Chicago. They didn't play him on Saturday. He started in the impressive win over Toronto. And yesterday, when Chris Quinn, filling in for Eric Spoelstra, cycled through, we kept waiting. And okay, you had Tyler Hero first off the bench. You had Omer Yurtseven filling in for Dwayne Dedman. We got that also. You had Duncan Robinson. But then you had Caleb Martin. instead of Victor Oladipo, which shows two things. One, Victor Oladipo has always been a back burner issue, even though we wanted to see the all-star Victor Oladipo. But Caleb Martin really matters for this team. And he can do so much for you in little ways. We're not sitting here talking the day after a huge win about Caleb Martin. But what Caleb Martin does for you, he gives you that two-way presence. So you've just explained why Max Strus is an upgrade in a closing lineup over Duncan Robinson. Caleb Martin is an upgrade over Max Strus because he does it on both ends. Now, when you get an opponent like Charlotte that doesn't give a rat's ass about defending, you can get away with just outscoring them.
So true. Yeah.
But you're going to play other teams who do and play both ways. The Milwaukees, the Bostons, when you move on in the playoffs, maybe the Philadelphias. I think Caleb Martin is really, and that's why I wrote about him, is the underrated rotation factor. So again, if you go back to, you have your starting lineup, I'm in agreement, big O1, Max Strus starts. So you have Adebayo and you have Tucker. Hopefully Tucker is healthy after last night's strain. You have Max Strus, you have Kyle Lowry, you have Jimmy Butler, fine. We know your next two are Sixth Man of the Year award winner Tyler Hero. We know Dwayne Dedmon has been fine in that role of backup center. God bless Omar Yurtseven and his fans out there. So you have two remaining rotation roles among four players. Duncan Robinson, Gabe Vincent, Caleb Martin, and who am I leaving out here? Duncan Robinson, Caleb Martin.
Dedmon?
Gabe Vincent, and I'm just drawing a blank here. Not Markeith. There's another player in the mix there also, and Eric Spoelstra is going to have to make a decision among those remaining players who winds up getting the minutes and who doesn't. So I think there could be Dedmon games. I think there could be Vincent games, but I really am starting to think they're going to be Markieff Morris games no matter what. I think Markieff is just, not Markieff, Caleb Martin, rather, that he's just too valuable not to wind up playing.
Well, and by the way, guys, I had the audio issues at the top, so I forgot to mention this. Please make sure you hit the like button for us. It does us a huge favor, and thanks as always for hanging out with us. You mentioned something about Caleb Martin a couple of weeks ago that I thought was extremely important. That you went through all the things that he brings over these last couple of minutes, but didn't even mention this. His rebounding. And it's not necessarily that he runs in and he grabs the rebound, but when the Heat were having just a terrible rebounding issues, in particular in Philadelphia, they were giving up so many offensive rebounds. Remember that game against 76? 76ers were the worst offensive rebounding team in the league, and they annihilated Miami on the glass. Well, Caleb Martin was out. And the thing that you mentioned that made a lot of sense to me was Caleb Martin isn't necessarily the guy who's like, he's going to block everybody out and he's going to do like, but the energy that he brings, like, see ball, get ball. And he's just got the athletic ability to run up, go and either tip the ball to a teammate or make sure that somebody else on the other team doesn't get it. And, when you're talking about rebounding, one guy gets the rebound, but it's a team effort. And so when you have somebody like Caleb Martin who's running, jumping towards the basket, the other team kind of gets their eyes, like they're looking off to the side, kind of, all right, where's Superman going to fly in? You've got to
put a body on the Energizer. Yes, that kind of player. That's what you need. As a matter of fact, the name I left out was Victor Oladipo as far as the other guy.
That tells you everything you need to know.
That he moved to the side. And I'm sure Heat Nation, Heat fans, I'm sure those who are in the chat right now, with us on YouTube are wondering why we didn't see more Vic after he scored 21, because people know the star name and recognize all that. So there will be tough decisions, but you want the energy. And you want the guy who's going to be there. Again, a bench role is different. When you're playing off the bench, it might be 12 minutes of energy. A guy like Vic is not used to that. Yes, he gave that to you in Toronto because he played 27 minutes. He got bigger minutes. He was able to do more. That's not going to happen. And when people ask me, why didn't Vic play yesterday and why does Caleb play? For this reason. You want the shots to go to Jimmy Butler. You want the shots to go to Tyler Hero. You will want, when he plays, the shots to go to Kyle Lowry. You have to find someone who goes into a game and says, if I don't shoot, what else can I do? God bless you, Victor Oladipo, but you're a career scorer. God bless you, Caleb Martin. You're not a career scorer. You will hustle. You will offensive rebound. You will make steals. You will take charges. You're that different kind of player. So again, when I get this about why are they playing this guy, not playing this guy, Clay, we're not talking about playing the 9 best guys. We're talking about playing the 9 guys that mesh together. That one guy who's willing to be an 8th man, or one guy who's willing to be a 9th man, not a Victor Oladipo who comes in after scoring 21 in Toronto on Sunday and is sitting in the postgame interview and goes, of course this is what I can do. If you give me the chance, I'm going to do this for you. But then Eric Spoelstra and Chris Quinn are saying, but that's not the kind of chance that's going to be there in the playoffs. because my 8th and 9th man in the playoffs, when we don't have back-to-backs like they did in Chicago and Toronto, aren't going to play as much. So I think it's going to wind up getting a little uneven. I feel for Vic. I feel for Marquis for the time they missed. But you know what? Train has left the station. And those who were aboard all season are the ones who are going to be the engine of this team.
Chase says this, basically we have too many ballers. Yeah. I mean, and it's a good problem to have. And so, but a lot of people are still, Thomas, Cedola, Daniel Grafton, a lot of people still asking, Lewis Jones, a lot of people still asking about Oladipo and what you could see his role be in the playoffs. So I'm going to sidetrack a little bit after the break. I want to get more into Oladipo and where you could see him and where you might not see him. That and a lot more coming up right here on Inside the Bank.
This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.